his friend. Times are gone for honest men, and sometimes far too long for slaves. In my shoes, walking slim, in my soul I pray to keep. Heaven sent hell away. No one sings like you anymore. Black hole sun, I want you come, ba 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 ba, wash away the rain. Black hole sun, won't you come? Won't you come? Hang my head, drown my fears, till you all just disappear. Black hole sun, won't you come and wash away the rain? Black hole sun, won't you come? Won't you come? Black hole sun, won't you come and wash away the rain? Black hole sun, won't you come? Won't you come? Black hole sun, black hole sun, won't you come? Black hole sun, black hole sun, won't you come? Black hole sun, black hole sun, won't you come?
Today is gonna be the day that they're gonna throw it back to you. By now, you should have somehow realized what you got to do. I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do about you now. About you now. Backbeat, the wood is on the street, that the fire in your heart is out. I'm sure you've heard it all before, but you never really had a doubt. I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do about you now. About you now. And all the roads we have to walk are winding, and all the lights that light the way are blinding. There are many things that I would like to say to you.
Hey, everybody. It's 6 o'clock, which by the name of the show should mean that it's starting now, but it's not. Just give it a couple minutes. Get yourself a snack. Get all settled in. Share out the link with your folks that aren't in the stream already. 6 o'clock Dad Rock Talk will begin in about 2.5 minutes.
You're my wonder, wonder. Let me tell you that today is gonna be the day, but they'll never throw it back to you. By now, you should have somehow realized what you're not to do. I don't believe that anybody feels the way I
We should have like some sort of conversation.
Welcome to the Virtual Stab Comedy Theater. It's time for 6 o'clock Dad Rock Talk. Please welcome to your screen, 6 o'clock Dad Rock Talk.
Hey folks, welcome to the show. I'm Corey Behringer, joined as always by my co-host and international man of mystery, Court Hansen. How you doing, Court?
Hello, I'm doing pretty good. I finished a puzzle today, a big 1,000-piece puzzle of an old map of the world. So I finished that today. It's been going for like maybe a week or so, just on and off working on it. But yeah, I finished, and it felt good to be done.
I haven't finished like an actual jigsaw puzzle since I was maybe 10. Like it's a long time ago, but I do enjoy it. We tried to do a puzzle, my wife and I, at the time girlfriend, this was years ago, because we thought it would be a nice relaxing thing, but she became frustrated very quickly by it. And mind you, it was about this big. It was a very small jigsaw puzzle we got on the internet. I thought it'd be fun, we'll get the wine flowing, we'll just have a relaxing night. I think we tried for like about 4 minutes. I don't even think we made it to 5. And we're like, we're done. This isn't for us. This dynamic. Let's go enjoy our company elsewhere.
I get really weird with it. I put on my big headphones and play like white noise and different like sine waves that are supposed to stimulate different brain activity. So I just have that going while I just like stare at the puzzle like this.
Are you being sincere about the white noise? Like, are you joking about the white noise?
No. I'm way into that stuff. It's one of the weirdest things about me, probably.
I'll agree with that.
I'll just like blast my brain with white noise and weird like meditation sounds, and then just stare at the puzzle like it's a chessboard, and then just do like one piece and then like try it, and then if it goes, it goes. If it doesn't, it's a very weird process, I think, if someone were to watch it, but it's usually just me. Angela helps sometimes.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, first I was going to say, I get the process because everyone has their process, so that's understandable. The white noise is where it's weird. I also have audiobooks going at the same time sometimes. I have a very cool app that lets you mix in the white noise as background to whatever else you're listening to. So I have some theta waves going, which are supposed to help your memory, and I've been listening to audiobooks plus theta waves. So it makes a weird vibrating noise, and it seems to work as far as keeping my ears and brain focused on what I'm listening to. But that's a different kind of outsider music. That is, I will agree with that. I mean, I'm sure that they're very helpful, but I can't help but point out how sinister theta wave sounds. Like, as a sci-fi fan, that sounds incredibly malicious and sinister, is theta waves.
It sounds good when you have it playing in your ears, though.
But we didn't come here to talk about theta waves, did we? We came here to talk about dad rock from around the world, minus England, because that's well-tread territory. They've had their day, and I think it's time to move past them.
And minus America as well.
Yeah, that should go without saying. I should hope.
I see most of dad rock as kind of a England America pairing. And then there's a lot of things that existed on like the periphery of that central exchange. I don't think there was as much exchange with any other parts of the world, at least not until later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because of the internet. Like, I think really the internet is when it started spreading. But before that, really what I've noticed through the bands that I was kind of looking into for this, a lot of the influence went like way farther back to like early, like first generation rock and roll. Because those were, getting internationally played. And then that influence remained. It wasn't until like, as we're saying, like, kind of early 2000s, late 90s, that more of a spread really started happening. But this has been a really fun episode to put together for Court and I. We assembled a playlist each of some interesting, I would assume new to both of us, tracks from international artists who I guess we can feel technically have a dad rock feel. But in this episode in particular, it's a little loosey-goosey. Is what we're really considering dad rock. I think they all kind of have a certain element of a perhaps a mass appeal, but also a dated quality. Would that be fair to say for some of yours?
Yeah. I think that for some of them, there's also like a fidelity issue as well, because it's a lot of the surviving recordings are not the first generation like master tapes. They're usually like, taken from a single that someone found in some tent in some market in Southeast Asia, or Africa, or Latin America, all the other parts of the world.
Probably made its way through several rounds of collectors and stuff. Right. Probably like tape clubs.
So some of it does sound really cool, but it is a little off-putting at first because there's like a strong like tape hiss sound, which I do think can be like kind of just off-putting, and it makes sense that people would, not get as into that if they're not tied to it. But I've learned to appreciate the tape hiss. Speaking of white noise stuff, I like I said, I do consider that weird stuff music in a kind of way, and I've learned to think about stuff that survives only in rough condition, to consider the condition a part of the thing itself now. So I've learned to kind of appreciate it in that sense, but I do get why it would be off-putting to someone at first. Yeah.
I mean, I completely agree that it is music, like any of those qualities, because, I mean, this sounds horribly, highfalutin, I'm sure, but, if it moves you, it is the art, like if you are moved by it, it's valid. Right. I completely agree with that. So let's get right into it. We're going to be jumping back and forth between clips of some of these songs, engineered/DJ'd by our producer and engineer, Jesse Jones, back at the Stab Comedy Theater. So, Jesse, if you would, please, let's hear the first clip.
Yo no canto por cantar, ni por tener buena voz. Canto porque la guitarra tiene sentido y razón, tiene corazón.
So that is Victor Jara. I assume it's Yara and not Jara because he is from Chile. He was a folk singer and poet and a whole bunch of other things too, and activist and communist. And he was famous internationally, and he was like a cultural ambassador between between Chile and Cuba, and he was a big supporter of Che Guevara, but he was arrested and killed by the Pinochet regime after the America-backed coup that brought Pinochet to power. That's kind of going to be a running theme through a lot of my picks. They're from a lot of countries that the CIA and the United States have been mucking around in for the past 80 years or so. But I had read about this guy before, but never actually listened to his music very much. But it made me look up like, who was that guy that was killed by the Pinochet regime? And so I just kind of did a little bit more digging into his history, and just very sad that you would have someone who is so who is admired by the public and very politically active, just get arrested and killed by. That's just scary. And I think that his music, it reminds me a lot of Phil Oakes because it's very melancholy, a lot of it. And after this happened, after his death, Phil Oakes was very, very paranoid that the same sort of thing was going to happen to him. And he was just in a constant state of paranoia because he thought that the FBI was watching him. And then he ended up committing suicide. And years later, it comes out that the FBI did have a file on him and they were surveilling him. And so I think that there is kind of a kinship there, and that they're both these like very, very outspoken folk singers who one way or another were kind of bullied out of having a voice. And it's just sad. And that song is called Manifesto, which is a pretty telling title as well. And it's a very sad way to kick off the show. It's only going to get darker, I think, in a lot of these cases. But still, I think that that's an example of how other music in other countries is literally sometimes cut off, from continuing to grow, and it is a shame. And some of this stuff only survives because a handful of people thought to preserve it, but a lot of it, people tried to get rid of all traces of it. And it makes it
the power of this music too.
Yeah.
Like, without being overly sappy, I think it is very fair to say that this is like indicative of how important folk music is and was. Like, really more so in a lot of ways than like any sort of fine art. Like, think about the impact that one has over the other. Like, to the point that a corrupt government would know they needed to snuff it out because of how powerful it is with the youth.
I chose this even though I knew it wouldn't be a fun topic, just because it's just kind of a good example of the weirder things that you can dig up if you look a little bit harder and look outside of normal music press as well. I came across this guy's story in like a history book, so you never know where you'll find your dad rock.
There you go. Let's hear another. Was the band The Beatniks with a song from their first album. The song's called Mirrors, and they are a really interesting group. So they, I found them through another one of my picks on the show today. They're a Japanese alt-rock duo from the early 80s. I want to say the first album came out in 1981, and it's it's a drummer from a like early Japanese electronic dance music group called Yellow Magic. I can't remember the last word.
Wow.
But it's Yellow Magic something.
Okay, sure it is.
I didn't give them their name, okay? But they're very cool too. Like, I checked them out. I'm not as into like EDM, so I mean it didn't move me as much, but it was very cool. they're like a whole like outfit. So the drummer from that started this group with the singer and really like kind of main force behind another band called Moonriders, which we'll get into later. But this in particular, though, since we're talking about this one, it really got me because it's like, it's so like of its time, but it's, I don't know, I guess it's naive of me to say this, but it's like, you almost, I think we're conditioned as American listeners, put it that way. We're conditioned as American listeners to assume that other countries are like behind the curve a little, I think.
Yeah.
Because we've seen examples of it. So it's not like we just invented that. But
right.
That's a preconceived notion that we have. And this proves how wrong that is. Like, this was completely relevant in 1981. And in some ways, like, ahead of many of the like the alternative acts in America in 81. Mm-hmm. I feel like it wasn't until the mid 80s that a lot of the bands sounded like this. It has like a certain darkness to it and like a brooding quality that I really, really enjoyed. And
yeah, that was cool.
It's just like wild rhythms too, which isn't surprising considering half composed of like a just legit great drummer. So you know that that's not going to fall by the wayside to just make dance grooves. So I dug this. Let's hear another.
That was very cool.
Đời anh như là chim bay, vòng tay em thì bé quá, người như mây mùa hoa, cầu đầu tư đừng chân anh, rồi mai yêu thương con, ta thôi đừng yêu nhau, đưa cho nhau em mãi mãi cho nhau như ban đầu. Thôi đừng yêu anh, mà sao nghe buồn ta, sao đang được con tim, vì mình nhớ từng giây mơ, ồ thay đổi luôn ngỡ, cuộc đời như là bông hoa, thương như là mây khói, sẽ không bao lâu rồi ta. Và không em những mơ, một em yêu mắt, tình yêu ta trong hơi thở, giây phút ta nhau thật rồi, nghe như nhạc thơ, yêu đương chỉ là đầu, rồi khi đôi mình xa nhau, tình yêu trong đầy nước mắt, làm sao quên được thương đau.
That one was Nội Buồn Con Gái, which is Vietnamese for the sadness of being a girl. And that was by Carol Kim, who is from South Vietnam. And I unfortunately couldn't find much biographical information about her. She just appears on a few compilations of Vietnamese rock music from the 60s and 70s, but not a lot of information about her that I could find out there, at least not in English. But that's just such a cool sounding song. You have the echoey vocals, which sound especially cool when the language isn't English, because there's a totally different rhythm to the singing and the kind of tones that they hit with certain words. Rock music from Southeast Asia in the 60s and 70s is interesting because you have this cultural exchange between the U.S. military presence and all of the, business that comes with that. So you don't just have the military, you also have people, providing food for the military, all of that. You have this long-term but very rapid cultural exchange in the cities in the South where American culture starts to really become popular. And after the fall of Saigon in 75 and fall of Phnom Penh in 75, a lot of that stuff was cut off right away because it was seen as very closely tied to Americans who were, the enemy at that point. But there was some really, really cool stuff that was being made before that because there was just this weird wartime economy that sprung up around Saigon that is kind of unlike anything else. It led to this very interesting mishmash of musical genres, and it was such a rapid thing too. Like as soon as the Americans got there in large numbers, you started to see these Vietnamese rock acts coming up. It just very interesting little cross section of history, and such a, like I said, a cool ass sounding song with the heavy guitar that comes in midway through as well. Yeah. No, I dug that. Like, it almost like, this sounds cynical, but it kind of like it makes you realize that a lot of it is like, it's so much of pop music in particular, I think, is just born out of necessity, because it is like a commodity, and that really shows it. Just like, a American presence will lead to that, and it's one of the few good things that I guess could have come out of that, Very few. We have it is like, regardless of the political context that it comes from, it is like a unique artifact of that time period and that region. So I think it has value, even if it's like, if you want to get into why Americans are there in the first place, which we do not have to.
That's great. Let's hear another. A song by Fela Kuti. The name of it escapes me right now, because I was just kind of bouncing around a lot of songs that I kind of remembered from about 10 years ago when I was first introduced to Fela Kuti.
Is he Hungarian?
No. So this is Afrobeat.
Oh shoot!
Basically
that sounds a lot like a Hungarian name, so that was just going to be my guess.
Particularly like that organ, for sure. No, I'm hearing that. And it's funny you mentioned that, because it would give that impression just in that early point in the song. So much of these songs, on average, they're about like 14 minutes to 30 minutes long pieces. So they really don't kick in till a little while, like basically into like the second movement, and then they are all over the place. Like,
cool.
Afrobeat is something that I've flirted with over the years, but like, I don't think I've ever really been in the right headspace to just fully absorb it. But whenever it's been like, exposed to me, for lack of a better word, like it's not really like anything else there is. And Fela Kuti certainly was the master of it. He's essentially the originator of it and creator. Him, as well as his drummer, I want to say Tony Allen, something Allen. He credits him. He's like, there wouldn't have been Afrobeat without him. The beats are just completely out of this world. A lot of times his band would feature two bassists, like simultaneously, doing these sort of counter rhythms. Just really interesting stuff. I don't know a whole lot about the man, apart from how important of a social figure he was, like as an activist, as well as, famous singer. He was much in the same way. I was feeling a lot of parallels to what you were talking about, your first pick. I forget his name, but very, very involved politically, this man was. And for that, he became a target. He was arrested like something over 200 times.
Jeez.
Yeah. And the longest stint that he stayed in was like, I think 24 months or like 20 months in prison.
Jeez.
So he lived the life. Like, it was not just like a convenient thing that he was playing political music. He was very, very, progressive in the movement.
And I think that is actually, and I guess we kind of touched on this, but I couldn't really articulate it before, but that is something that makes it distinct from American political music, I think. I don't think that there's many American musicians over the years, present day included, who were like truly radical and politically, like very, very politically, like a threat, like I said, a threat to kind of the status quo. Like, I don't think that for all of like punk's music, like threat to suburban culture and stuff, I don't think that it was ever really a threat to like Ronald Reagan in the 80s or, Clinton or George W. Like it's very much a thing that just targets like suburban morality, but it's not quite, it's like American music doesn't seem to make that jump from singer-songwriter to singer-songwriter, activist, militant, and so on.
And I think so much of that is because like we didn't need it. Like, we didn't need a voice of our generation to literally riot in the streets and to create a revolution. These countries needed that.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't need punk to tell us to do that.
And it's also, I think, important and interesting to consider too that like the Vietnam protests in America brought us some of the best music ever, just like that political atmosphere of the anti-war protests. But that was a largely like middle class movement in response to the draft. And then once the draft was, once they ended the draft, people kind of stopped paying attention to American foreign policy again, at least people in the middle class who didn't have to go fight anymore.
No longer effective.
And so it is kind of interesting that all the music that we as Americans love to think of as really, really revolutionary and challenging the status quo, it is more or less like a lot of suburban kids growing up to make really good music, but not necessarily like Phil Ochs is really one of the, and Woody Guthrie and like Joe Hill are some of the few that I can think of in American musical history that were like actively like enemies of the status quo. And it's just interesting that, I don't know, I just have never really thought to articulate it like that before. So sorry for my tangent.
No, I think that I'm so glad that this episode brought that tangent, because it's not something I had ever considered before. Was, I think that listening to the like even the pop music from these other countries puts it into that perspective for us. We're forced to see that perspective, and like how it was such a parallel to like what was happening here, which was nothing comparatively.
It's like on the weird Zoom DNC a few weeks back, they had Stephen Stills doing Buffalo Springfield For What It's Worth, which is a famous protest song, at least by American standards. But it's in response to like concerts getting shut down on the Sunset Strip. It's not about, and it's like all of the credit that song is still getting for being a very like revolutionary anti-authority song. It's a very vague kind of message, and it was written in response to concerts getting shut down, which is not the same thing as a civil war, which is what some of this music comes out of miraculously.
Yeah, people being
it's just an interesting kind of recontextualization of pop culture, I guess, which is a very pretentious way to put it, but I feel wordy today.
I think so. Let's hear another.
Oh, I know what this is. I'm sorry, Jesse. I meant to warn you about this. Can you jump to like a minute 40 on this one? I forgot that this one has like a long, noisy intro part. That one's my most recent pick. That's from 1997. It's Cornelius from Japan with God Only Knows. The reason that I felt this one was fair play, despite being a little more recent, even though, 23 years ago now, is that it is obviously a pretty direct reference to the Beach Boys, and musically you do hear it in the vocal harmonies, especially as the song goes on. It just gets weirder. And the main guy behind Cornelius, it's a solo project of the guitarist from Flipper's Guitar, which is like a Japanese kind of, they're a mix between like noise rock and like mall slash elevator like music. Yeah. Very weird, but interesting if you're into stuff like Burt Bacharach or like exotic music from the 50s. It's kind of like that combined with weird noise guitar. It's cool. But this is his solo project. And that's from the first album, which came out in 97. And since then, he's been pretty regularly compared in at least the Western press to Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys. I don't know how accurate that is to his personality. I wonder if there's anything that's kind of lost in translation and people are just looking for a point of comparison. But, he's an admitted fan, so it's not totally unheard of to make the comparison. But just a very interesting building up of sounds in that. It started off with, like, we heard it, and I forgot about, with just a noise collage thing. And then it builds up into like a kind of soft pop, and then you come in with the hard drums and stuff. It's just very, very cool. I thought that maybe when you mentioned like a Japanese duo, I thought you were going to talk about Flipper's Guitar.
Are they a duo? Okay.
Yeah, but different Japanese 80s and early 90s rock bands. I don't know. What do you think of that?
I really dug that, particularly how it built. So you took the words right out of my mouth. Like, how it starts with that real soft, like meandering strumming guitar. Big fan of it. And I love how that could turn into, like the booming sort of distorted guitars over the top. Like when it starts, I'm pretty sure that might even be the same chord and rhythm from, it made me think of the Eagles' Best of My Love. Like, just like that very, like, I almost thought he was going to go into that because it was so simple.
Yeah.
Which would have been quite unexpected. I really dug that though. So do you know, like in your research on that, like, is he playing all the instruments? Is it that kind of solo project?
Yeah. It's like he does all that stuff. I believe.
Nice.
I don't know too much about him, and some of his albums I just have not been able to get into. They're a little too noisy even for me, the white noise person.
Yeah.
But that first album, which the name is escaping me, but it has a bright orange cover, is so good. And it's so weird. The only thing I can really compare it to from around that time and I mean this in like a very positive way, is Gorillaz.
Okay.
Like just kind of this weird mishmash of genres in a solo project that's so that's probably the closest thing I would compare it to, despite not musically sounding that similar. It's just kind of that same sort of experimentation that's I think very cool.
Yeah, and I could see the connection there of just a certain aesthetic, and not the same aesthetic, but that it's an aesthetic that's built around an atmosphere. Like it seems like it's really trying to create a world that you can live in through the period of the song. That's cool. Let's hear another. So that was the perfect transition from the previous song. So this is Dirty 3, and the song is Sue's Last Ride. So I say it's the perfect transition because what makes Dirty 3 so special is the atmosphere. They're an instrumental trio from Australia. This is from the early 90s. They started putting stuff out like in late 80s, early 90s.
Okay.
So much of their stuff is just built around a very slow build and like very mournful melodies, with a fair amount of distortion on like violin and stuff.
Do they have any connection to Nick Cave?
Yes.
Okay.
Warren Ellis is the.
I could tell from the. I was like, oh, this is the Jesse James. This is the assassination of Jesse James violin. I knew immediately.
Two.
Like he had to be involved in some way. Not Nick Cave, but like it's got to be in that same sphere of Australian outback weirdos.
Well, yeah, you nailed it because Nick Cave, in particular, he does those soundtracks with Warren Ellis.
Yes.
Those aren't like Bad Seed soundtracks. That's Nick Cave and Warren Ellis.
Have you listened? Have you seen the movie or listened to the soundtrack or both? The Proposition.
Loved it.
That movie is so good. Yeah. I used to listen to Nick Cave, Warren Ellis soundtracks just as like a mood setting when I was just feeling pretty grumpy. I just like have headphones on and just listen to the music that's playing when like when Casey Affleck shoots Brad Pitt. And I'll just be like, yeah, this is how I'm feeling. I'm feeling conflicted in the exact same way as the coward Robert Ford.
Well, you might really dig Dirty 3 then, because...
Yeah, I didn't know anything about Warren Ellis outside of his collaborations with Nick Cave, but as soon as I heard that, I could tell it was probably him.
I think as far as like modern violinists, and I'm speaking on a subject I know extremely little about, but I would probably venture to say as far as modern violinists go, he's one of the few that has a very signature tone, not even just sound like a tone, like that's Warren Ellis, like immediately you can hear it.
I can't say I know many modern violinists' tones. There's a guy from Yellow Card. And that's about it.
Well, I think so many, like, as far as even, alt and indie rock, like, violins go, like, there is a presence of that on a lot of stuff, but they're very much playing to the song rather than a specific creator. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah, I know what you're saying.
They're servicing the song rather than this is my stamp that I'm putting on, I really dig this.
Yeah, that was cool. I'm going to dive into more of that.
yeah, after compiling this list, it reminded me of Dirty Three, a band that I've listened to a very small amount of over the years. And this, I think it caught me at a good time because I've been listening to more instrumental stuff lately, which I didn't really used to. And
it also reminded me a lot of Godspeed You Black Emperor as well. With the it sounded like Dead Flag Blues from their first album with like the violin and stuff. Which is also like
I've been told I need to get into.
if you like this kind of dreary, bleak, atmospheric instrumental stuff, you'll definitely like Godspeed.
Nice. Let's hear another.
The right for men, people. I am bare-handed, nothing to defend myself. I am not made of iron, I am not made of iron, people. I am not made of iron, I am a human being like others. If you push me hard, then I will surrender. If you push me hard, then I will surrender. I am not made of iron, I am not made of iron, people.
That was I Am Not Made of Iron from 1977 by Chrissy Zebi Tembo from Zambia. I knew that there were a lot of compilations of like garage rock and like hard rock from Africa, but I hadn't really looked into those compilations very much. But as I was digging through, this is the one that stood out immediately because it has that like driving, really, really fuzzy. You can't tell if it's a guitar or bass. It just is. Yeah, it sounds like Death from Above 1979 or something like that.
Well, it also reminded me of like more specifically like Detroit like garage rock, like just that filthy bad guitar tone.
Yeah, like a MC5 or something.
Yeah.
And I wasn't, again, I didn't find much biographical info on this guy, but to make up for it, I did want to point anyone interested to a compilation I found that's on Bandcamp by Now Again Records called Zamrock. And it's a compilation of music from the 60s and 70s in Zambia. And it has a lot of really cool stuff, but this was just my pick from it. And I don't know, it's just,
it's very cool.
It has, and it kind of touches on what I said at the top of the show about the list, like the fidelity of the track itself. Like I imagine that some people would hear that super blown out guitar sound and be kind of put off from it, and they wouldn't be able to get into the kind of, I guess, aesthetics of that. But I think it's just like it adds so much to the feel of the song that it does have that kind of degraded quality to it. It just sounds neat. It's something that I think a lot of like garage bands have tried to copy, but have not been able to get as accurately as it was done here.
Yeah, I think you just have to have shitty gear. It comes down to like the sincerity of the low fidelity. Like
exactly, yeah.
You know, so that's cool. I'm definitely checking out that Bandcamp playlist because this was cool.
And that's from volume 2, so there's going to be. What's that?
I was just saying, and I'm very picky with garage rock. So,
me too.
You know, like I feel like I'm going to find some real gems here. So that excites me. So you said it's volume 2.
Yeah, that's volume 2. So there's, I don't know how many volumes, but dig in, folks.
Well, I think we got time for one more. Jesse, if you would indulge me a little, could you please play the Moonriders song that's on my playlist?
Well, okay. Oh, there it is. It doesn't say Moonriders in like the title. I have to get down into the description.
I'm sorry. I thought it did. So
No.
it's called.
I got it.
Oh Dynamo or
Yep.
Good Dynamo. Yes.
Yep.
I forget the exact title.
It's
It's
what-
got a crazy title.
It's what was coming up anyway, so we got it.
Oh, sweet. That was Moonriders with a title I can't quite remember. It was something like Cool Dynamo, So Great, something like that.
Okay.
I know Dynamo was in the title. It's
Cool.
the opening track off of a 2006 album of theirs that I've been listening to a bunch. But they've been making records since the mid-'70s.
Okay.
So Jacqueline turned me on to this band. Like, she found them the same night as me when we were watching a movie called Tokyo Godfathers.
I've heard of this,
It's
but I have
great.
not seen it.
It's from the same director of like Paprika.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And this whole movie, we're really digging the soundtrack. And so she looks it up. And she's like, well, you might like this. The guy who did the soundtrack has a band called Moonriders. And apparently, according to the internet, they're like one of the most influential Japanese pop rock bands of all time. Like, they're huge over there. I had never heard of them. This guy also is the singer in the Beatniks that we heard earlier. And he's also mostly known in America for our weird fanboys as the composer of such soundtracks as Mother and Earthbound and Earthbound 2. Yeah, he's that guy. Yeah,
I had no
and, like,
idea.
contributed
But
to
now
Melee.
I was going to say it had like a kind of melancholy but childlike sound. And then if there's one thing to describe those games, it's like melancholy but childlike.
Exactly.
So that's very interesting. I did not expect that.
Oh yeah, every step of the way with getting into this band over like the last week or so has been just another level of delight, because I'll find that there's not a whole lot that I could find in the way of like any real biography past the wiki page, which is fairly small. But like, yeah, like hearing that he composed some of the soundtrack that like meant a great deal to me in my childhood, and you know, then it comes like full circle.
Even more full circle, that soundtrack interestingly samples a like distorted clip from a Beach Boys song.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Yeah.
I
can't remember the name of the track from the game, but the Beach Boys song is Deirdre from 1970. 1970.
I knew that he has cited like his influences, like this is just from the wiki page, like under influences, particularly on those soundtracks. He cited the Beatles, Beach Boys, and Nilsson as like Harry Nilsson big time. Like,
okay, I'm gonna dive into this guy some more because that's very cool. I did not anticipate the video game connection.
Exactly, yeah. And the band itself is phenomenal. Lots of great live cuts that you could find. The best ones are like from the 90s. They put on such a fun show, and his lead guitar player is like crazy good. Just like your most classic sort of rock and roll shredding of just the sort of, just old school rock and roll, just licks. I don't know. They're such a delight to watch. I've really been enjoying.
I'm very excited to get into that.
Yeah. So really, this whole show has been built around me trying to get viewers to get into Moonriders because they're fantastic.
We do have a little bit more time. Jesse, can I do a pick as well that has a similar kind of theme to the name Moonriders?
Sure. What do we got?
Go with the song Zodiac by Zodiac.
Just so happens that was going to be the next one for you if we got around to it as well.
Oh, awesome.
All right. 1 second. Here it is.
You're going to like this. So that was Zodiac by the band Zodiac from 1980s album Disco Alliance. They're from Latvia, then a part of the Soviet Union. And I came across them a while ago while I was just looking for like weird music. And I was immediately taken with that because it has the coolest artwork you've ever seen. It's got a bunch of cool like science fiction cosmonauts on it. And it just, I've never been able to get super into Kraftwerk, but I feel like if I'm going to, it's going to be because I like Zodiac so much. And just I don't know, maybe it's because they were using, long forgotten Soviet synths. I'm sure that there's some like weird collectors who are obsessed with them. I know that there are. My friend has told me about them. But it's just another one that's such a cool product of its time and place. It's so it sounds so 80s and so synthy, but it's definitely not. It's not Western. Like it's not from the places that we're used to. It's from Latvia, and it just has. I've listened to that album a bunch of times, and it just has really neat kind of surprisingly like touching melodies to it. So even though some of the songs are kind of repetitive in that like Euro disco way, they do have these nice little like floaty melodies over the top that just I don't know, something about it just works for me. And that's kind of the one that I had in mind when I was thinking, when I pitched expanding our original idea of Canadian bands to international bands. It's like, oh yeah, I gotta have Zodiac. Yeah, what'd you think of that?
I really dug it because so I immediately recognized it for being like, okay, this is electronic music. Mm-hmm. But what set it apart for me was the tone on the crashed hi-hat that really like enforces the groove on this. Like that was such a dirty tone that it felt like out of place with like the electronic truly synth sounds. So it almost sounds like they just recorded like smacking a hi-hat in between and they used the sample of that. Which,
I mean, maybe they did.
Whether or not they did, like it sounds more I don't know, kind of raw. I guess would be a good word for it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was a little an unexpected rhythm choice for that sort of music. I feel like most people would just go to like the 4 on the floor to like maintain the disco groove, but instead they like throw that in there to like reinforce this hard beat every other time, you know. It was cool. I really dug that.
It was put out on the Soviet like state-owned record label, which was called Melodia. And when you think like Soviet state-owned record label, my first image isn't necessarily like weird, spooky synth dance music. Like, you think it would be like, I don't know, classical music or something like that government censors would think is appropriate for people, but you wouldn't expect it to have something as experimental and strange as this. But I think that the reality that people are kind of waking up to now, now that the Eastern Bloc has been deblocked for so long, is people are realizing that there was like a thriving invalid culture in some of these places that during the Cold War we viewed as totally like what's the word I'm looking for, like homogenous and monochromatic. Like we think of them, we think of it a certain way, and then the more you dig into it, you realize that people are creative no matter where they are, and they're going to use the materials at their disposal to make something interesting. And I think we saw that with a lot of the stuff from all over the world that we picked tonight. Is like the materials at hand can make something way more interesting than what you'd get from a typical American or English band.
Absolutely. Completely agree with that. And that's why I'm so glad we did this show, because that was a very fun one. I'd like to think we're going to do another one of these.
Yeah, I think we should.
Yeah, like we'll throw it in the rotation. We'll have like the international, because this was a lot of fun for the discovery aspect of it. So we hope you guys enjoyed it as much as we had a great time putting together our playlist. Please tune in next week, same time, with a different theme. We don't know what it'll be yet, but we'll be sure to tell you all about it on our Instagram page. Please follow us at DadRockTalk. We'll be posting all the stuff there. Have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thanks for joining us. Thank you once again, Court and Corey, for another... Oh, wait, they're not hearing me. Sorry. I was just doing the goodbye, and you guys didn't hear me. Thank you to Court and Corey again for another wonderful, this time global dive into, we'll say, tangential dad rocking.
Hey. We will see it.
Yeah. So thanks for hanging out with us. Stick around. Well, not stick around, because I'm going to send you away for a second. But come back at the top of the hour for the Stab Show. It's, trying to remember. David Coleman, Willie Travis, and Jacqueline Wyan. We're going back into the Wyan Behringer household again. Get used to seeing that view. We're going to see that.
Used to this, buddy.
So in the meantime, let me send you guys over. I think they're just going to go into another show at the top of the hour. Send you guys over to the Pack Theater, but feel free to join us back again at 8 o'clock for the Stab Show. Oh, no, it looks like they're between shows, so of course they're going to go away. I don't know what they're doing at Planet Scum, but go ahead and watch them instead. So we'll see you at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
Yeah, that was. I thoroughly enjoyed that one.
I'm going to go watch some of season 1 of Fargo. So, yeah, haven't watched it in a while. Good show if you haven't watched